Tale Stories cottage, where all stories can be found.
Broken String. In the dim light of their cold mansion, Tiara moved with the stiffness of a clockwork doll. At 19, she wore a wedding ring that felt like a shackle. Toby, her husband, stood behind her, his hands resting heavily on her shoulders. He was the descendant of a lineage steeped in shadows, a man who didn't want a wife, but a possession. With a whisper of ancient words, he tightened the invisible threads that bound her will to his. Toby's love was a cage built of fear and control. Every morning he reached into her purse, draining her bank accounts to fuel his own dark appetites. When she dared to look up or ask a question, his voice turned into a whip. He treated her like a puppet, dictating her every breath, her every step, and her every thought, leaving her soul bruised and silent. The magic was a heavy fog in Tiara's mind. She lived in a perpetual daze, seeing the world through a veil of purple mist. She would sit for hours in the grand parlor, her hands folded in her lap, waiting for the next command. She was a ghost in her own life, unaware that the man she called husband was the jailer of her spirit. One rainy Tuesday, Toby prepared for a long journey across the sea to consult with his dark coven. He stood at the grand oak doors, his suitcase packed with stolen wealth and ancient grimoires. He looked at Tiara one last time, reinforcing the spell with a sharp flick of his wrist. "Stay inside," he commanded. "Do not cross the threshold until I return." Days passed in silence. One afternoon, a stray cat perched on the windowsill, batting at a loose sapphire earring Tiara had dropped. The jewel fell, bouncing across the floor and rolling out through the propped open garden door. Without thinking, driven by a flicker of her old self, Tiara stepped out into the bright, unfiltered sunlight to retrieve it. The moment her feet touched the soil outside the boundary of the house, the air changed. The invisible strings snapped with a sound like breaking glass. The purple fog in her mind evaporated, replaced by the stinging clarity of 1,000 suppressed memories. Tiara fell to her knees, gasping as the weight of Toby's cruelty finally hit her with the force of a tidal wave. With her mind finally her own, Tiara didn't hesitate. She ran until her lungs burned, reaching the local precinct. There she met Officer Mara, a woman with kind eyes and a steady hand. Tiara told her everything. The magic, the theft, the hidden basement where Toby kept his dark relics. For the first time in years, Tiara felt the strength of her own voice. When Toby returned from his trip, he didn't find a submissive doll waiting in the foyer. Instead, he found the cold steel of handcuffs. The authorities, led by Tiara's testimony and the evidence of his financial crimes, swarmed the mansion. Toby screamed curses, trying to weave a spell, but his power withered under the bright lights of justice. The trial was long, but Tiara stood tall. Once Toby was locked away in a cell where no magic could reach, Tiara vanished. She traveled to a small cottage by the sea, a place known only to those she trusted. The salt air began to wash away the scent of incense and old leather that had haunted her clothes for so long. Healing was not a straight path, but Tiara walked it every day. She learned to use her hands for painting rather than holding onto the strings of the past. The scars remained, but they were no longer chains. In the quiet of her secret sanctuary, Tiara finally belonged to herself, a woman no longer a doll, but a masterpiece in progress.
All right, that's the end of the story. From the story we can get the morale: do not let stranger get into our life and treat us like a doll. Always be kind and have courage. There will always be sunlight after the rain. So don't ever give up.
Thank you for watching, everyone. Help us to build this channel by subscribe, like and share. See you in next story.